Okay, hi, nice meeting you over here again. And today I'm very excited to have Dr. Amy Watson, who actually does acupuncture as well. And she's a vet who locums 1 day a week. But she's over here to describe to us the experiences of her being a vet and answer some questions as well.
Good to see you. But you see, I don't think that's a simple question. It is and it isn't, because you could kind of make it simple and say it's because I love animals. But actually, I think it's too simplistic to say that. I think it's more a case of I wanted to help and to resolve problems. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what vets are. We're problem solvers. We have a problem and we solve it, and we're trained to do that. But for me, I think the thing I love the most is that interaction, not just with the animals, but with my clients as well. If I can be of some benefit to that relationship, then that's fantastic. I was very conscious of the fact that animals come with clients, and it was a package. Yes, I would say so. I really enjoyed it. Oh, a great time. Yeah, it was good fun. I think I maybe enjoyed myself a little bit too much in the preclinical years. And then in the clinical years, I kind of knuckled down a bit more. And I was lucky. We had a really fantastic year. It wasn't particularly big. We all got on very well. We had fantastic clinicians. We had good rapport with them. Interesting cases. Yeah, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Anything involving histology, yes, anything that involved looking down a microscope was just like, you know, rabbit in the headlights. And I found ultrasound pretty difficult as well. But no, the rest of it, I thought it was just a learning curve and you just had to go through it. But it was all interesting. It was all fascinating. Really good. I was really lucky. I had a really good job, good support, busy practice, big hospital with branch practices as well. And I worked with some really super vets who, the one in particular, I remember thinking if I could be as good as her, I'd be very pleased, because she was really fantastic with her clients and she was a really good surgeon and a really good vet. She was just a good all-round package. But I found it really interesting because she would say, I remember one day walking in and someone was having a grunt because they'd had a difficult encounter with a client. And she just sort of said, they're probably just having a really bad day. You don't know what's going on at home. And I was just like, that's such a really interesting way of putting it, because it's true. And sometimes you do end up with that situation and you go, actually, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. And it could be a really challenging situation for them. For me, yes, but I would also counter by saying that I think my family life helped, because my father in particular was very good with people and great at, he was a wine merchant. That's a fairly challenging thing to sell, but he had this fantastic rapport. You could put him in a room with anybody and he'd just get on with it and have a great time. And I think I learned a lot from him, which then really facilitated, because I think you come out of vet school and you've got all these fantastic clinical skills, and then you are put in a consult room and suddenly you have to do that communication, the dialogue, and working together as a team and figuring out, well, what as a client are you wanting from this and what can I bring to the table? At the same time, always ensuring the welfare and the benefit of the patient is core, but it's working together as a team. I think having seen that was really helpful. I don't think I necessarily got so much of that from university. We didn't do a huge amount of communication skills, but I think I was just fortunate that I already got that to a certain extent down pat.
It sounds as though you're in quite a unique situation whereby you had your father to look up to and learn sort of a communication skills with. Yeah. Do you know of many friends who sort of didn't have that sort of influence and struggled in working life?
I would say I've seen vets come and go who find that bit challenging. I think particularly for the new grads, you can see sometimes that you're almost, they have that training of, this is how I need to work a case up, this is what I need to do, but that isn't necessarily what's viable for the client for a variety of reasons, be that emotional, ethical, financial, whatever. That's not necessarily what they want to do. And I think sometimes, especially the new grads, struggle with that initially, because that's, well, this is what we need to do. And sometimes everyone's taking that step back and going, actually, is that the right thing for this patient? And how, as a client, do you feel about it? Sometimes just asking that simple question of, how do you feel about this, if this is what I'm suggesting, is such a simple question to ask and can make such a huge difference. Yeah, I'm slightly unusual in what I do nowadays, I suppose you say. So I started working in general practice when I qualified. I qualified 2005 in July, started work October at this practice on the Wiltshire-Gloucestershire border, which was really fantastic because we did everything and we did our own out of hours. And I did that for, I think, 8 or 9 years. And then my husband then moved and started locuming, and I moved around. And I did a bit of locum work at practices in Cambridge and Bicester, and then I had my first child, and then we moved down to Dorset, and then I've kind of carried on locuming because I got a good grounding from my first job and having been in it for a long time, and to build up those skills. And I started doing acupuncture in about 2013 and loved it and was amazed by how good it was. And for me, it's perfect because so much of what I enjoy is building that rapport and relationship with my client. And my consults are so much longer now. You know, my first consult's 1.5 hours to 2 hours long. I mean, I really take my time, partly because I'm doing other things, because I've got the canine rehab certificate as well. And now I've started doing some herbal work as well. So it's a case of, what have we got going on? What can I mix in? And so I have that time to do that and build those relationships up and really integrate all of this together alongside the conventional medicine. I'm very stringent about that. We need to mix this all together. So I set up PinPoint as a mobile service in about 2000, when was it? 2016, 2015, something like that, between the two children. Then I had another child, and I do, and then I went from being mobile to having these premises. So yeah, it's good. Really challenging because I have no idea about the business side of things. I kind of make it up as I go along. I have very good accountants who are very helpful and well know the actual business side of things, so they help me out quite a lot. And then a lot of reading and hoping I get it right. But there's no training, so that's where I struggle, you know, that whole marketing side of things, and also being mindful of not overstepping the mark and staying within the guidelines that come from our governing body and so on, that I'm not promoting too heavily. I don't have any concept about the business side of things other than I make it up, and it seems to work reasonably well. That's not what people come to see me from, but that would be nice to have more training on that, I think.
What you're talking a little bit about, the not overstepping the mark. Could you elaborate a bit on that, please?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm never quite sure what I can or can't do from the Royal College perspective with regards to marketing. And I'm also mindful of not stepping on the toes of my general vets in the area. And I want my clients to be very much based with them. And then they come and say, I'm an extension of the team. In effect, that's how I see myself. So yeah, I find that bit a bit challenging. And sometimes if you look at what marketing people will say who are outside of the veterinary sphere, they're like, you know, you need to do these cards and tell people you'll solve all these problems. And I go, well, just don't think I can quite make that guarantee, because let's be honest, you can't guarantee anything in medicine at all. You know, you can have a fairly good idea it'll work, but you can never say 100%. So yeah, but that's where I sometimes struggle. I would like a little bit more guidance as to what we absolutely can and can't say, you know. And I would never promote certain things over other things. I would never say, you know, medicines are wrong, because they're not. Anything I do is superior, because it's not. It works together as a synergistic combination. Time and my efficiency, and having staff to do all the other bits and pieces that I don't necessarily need to do, but balancing that out against the finances of having people in. And at the moment with COVID, it's that constant, am I doing the right thing? Have I got enough, you know, protective mechanisms in play? I will allow my clients in the consult room, but my consult room's nearly 5 meters in length. It's big because I need that for the rehab side of things. So I can normally have them sat at one end. We've got all our PPE on, we've got sanitizers, I'm antibiotics, but you're always constantly worrying at the moment, am I doing enough? And I might turn, you know, the number of people who come, my footfall is much smaller than a general practice because my consult. Yeah. In 5 years' time, I would like it to be more of a multidiscipline centre with more people here. So I have a colleague who's here right now at the moment who does chiropractic work. He's a vet, does chiropractic, acupuncture, other bits and pieces. So he is seeing a client of mine for chiropractic work, and I would like that to be a consistent thing. It would be nice to have a full-time physio here. Yeah, just turn it more into a more multidiscipline centre with more of the holistic, I don't like that word, or alternative, or maybe complementary. You know, there's more integrated things that actually there's sometimes the paraprofessionals can come in and do and really have a skill set that we should be utilising far more than I think we do.
I think integrated is a fairly good word.
Yeah, I like it because I think it really describes, and it says what it does, you know, it says what it says on the tin, which is this should be integrated in, all of this should be integrated.
It sounds as though you have had quite a sort of varied and almost colourful sort of a veterinary career, spanning from being an employee in a mixed practice, being in a good practice as well, and after that coming to your own sort of a business really.
Oh, I think it's a multifactorial thing, and I think it starts right back at who we're picking, choosing to put forward as vets. I think there's some, you know, I think there's such a high demand for the places. You pick people on fantastic grades, and actually those people are generally the ones who are, you know, I hold my hands up, I'm probably similar to this, more the perfectionists, the A-types who want to get everything perfect, and this is, you know, do the perfect thing, and it doesn't lend itself to a profession where you have that variable that is clients who don't necessarily want to do that, and so that is a struggle. I think so I think that is a component. I don't think we teach resilience anyway near well enough, or certainly I don't think it was there when I was there. I suspect that has changed, and it sounds like there's beginning to see some sort of resilience training coming in within the profession itself at the vet schools. And I wonder whether there's also my brain's just gone flat. Sorry, I've had a moment where I've blanked out for a second. And then when you get into, I think that's it. When you get into general practice, you know, it's hard, you know, it's busy, it's long hours, it's emotionally draining. I think we need to restructure the way the practices work, because I've worked in quite a few when I've been locuming, and there just doesn't seem to be that built-in sort of capacity for dealing with the extras that come through, or people having time to write their paperwork or finish up their notes. It's almost a case of, if people want to come, or we've got emergencies, we just deal with it. And I don't think that puts a lot of pressure on people, and getting that work-life balance is very difficult. It is very difficult, and it does come with the profession to a certain extent, but I think we need to try and come up with a way of changing that up a little bit. And I think for all the hard work and the emotional toil that everyone puts in, the pay is not great. Now, the difficulty with it's true. I mean, we should hold our hands up and say that it's not great. It's not bad, but it's not great for the effort, the time. And I say that emotional drain, as well as that physical working, not eating lunch, because how often do vets never get to eat lunch? It's rare. And so I think it's a case of, but to change that means there's going to be a seismic shift within the profession, but also within the wider public, because I don't think that you talk to general, they all think vets get paid really well because they charge a lot. And I think part of that is because people have the NHS and have no concept of what healthcare costs. There's so much to it as to how we need to change things, but there do need to be some changes. I think we need to be better at training with resilience for our staff, better at looking after our staff in general practice, and trying to sort out some form of better compensation, for, you know, remuneration for staff going forward. You know, yeah, it's difficult. It's really difficult. There's so much to it, and I don't envy people trying to figure out how best to move this forward. I think it's really nice when you see some practices I've seen, because you know the vet forums that we've got. You know, there's some really fantastic, really supportive, caring ones. And there was a lady on there, and I can't remember for the life of me her name or where she was, but she's set up a practice, and she's really trying to make some of these seismic shifts. And you just think, good on her. I don't know how it's working out for her, but really, it was nice to see that. I think sometimes it's so easy as a profession to get stuck in our ways, and we need to switch it.
It sounds as though you have been thinking about this as well.
I think about it all the time, you know, well, not all the time, but, you know, you see it all the time and you go, how can we make this better?
Yeah.
Because what worries me is that you see all these lovely new grads coming in and they're so enthusiastic on their first day, and you just see their confidence being wiped out, and then they leave. And I mean, that's a huge problem for the profession, but it's a real tragedy for that person.
5 years training.
Yeah, exactly. 5, 6 years training, all this, I'm going to do this. And I need to, oh yeah, no, I'm all, I end up being the cheerleader when I'm locoming. I get new grads in. I'm like the cheerleader out there.
Well done, you.
I think because I do think the profession are really slow sometimes at actually making moves and changing forward, and you'll see that in the medical side of things sometimes as well. Practices get set in their ways, and we're not necessarily quick at adopting new practices. We are a lot better than we used to be, I think, you know, and actually from that side of it, but I think that's fairly easy to implement as well. Whereas actually changing a whole practice and the way the practice is set up is a massive shift, and people kind of get stuck in a way and go, well, it works, why change it? And you're kind of like, well, because actually everyone's burning out, everyone's leaving. Until we hit a real crunch point, there's almost no impetus to do it.
Do you think
And we're hitting a crunch point now. That's the thing. So I think there has to be a change at some point soon.
When I was in vet college and we had a female lecturer, and she was telling us that she qualified, I think 65 or 70, 1965 or 1970, and she was the only female graduate there.
It's a really interesting question. And I used to do a talk for schools on exactly this subject. It was like women in science and engineering. And I used to do this and say, actually, it is a huge thing. And that's another area where the profession is starting to struggle, because there's such a large female group, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but it does, you know, unfortunately by our very biology, we're the ones that go off and have the kids, and so that then makes that it is more challenging then to switch back into, and a lot of practices don't seem keen on split working, part-time, you know, job shares. That's the word I'm after. Why it is, I don't know. I wonder if it's because it seems to be, from my understanding, that girls are generally seem to mature that little bit earlier, and therefore I think probably get the slightly better grades. I think we're more personable, communicative. That's a terrible thing to say. I'm not saying, I'm sorry boys, I'm sorry chaps, I'm not saying you can't. I feel really bad.
I don't think it's too far wrong.
I think if you look at a male teenager versus a female teenager, I'm being so stereotypical here, it's terrible. But then their communication skills are maybe not quite so good. And I think the vet schools are picking up on the fact that we need decent communication skills in this profession. That's becoming, you know, is fairly common, is fairly recognised. So maybe the girls just present themselves that little bit better at interview because they're more communicable, they're able to get the better grades because there's that slight maturity kicking in a little bit earlier. But I don't know. I also don't know whether men just go off and think, well, I don't know whether they think it's more of a female job nowadays. I suppose you get a switch and then it starts to roll, and then you get that stereotype of, well, actually, it's the girls who go and do the vetting. It's all fluffy animals and so on. And I think there's much more drive towards maybe the small animal side of things rather than the large animal, where you might assume the men and the chaps are going to come into the large animal or equine. I don't, it's a good question. I hadn't thought about it from that point of view as to why it is that it is a case of there's the switch. I just recognised there is the switch. That's a really interesting question. I don't know. I'm throwing ideas out in a hugely stereotypical manner. I would say, make sure you know exactly what you're letting yourself in for. Make sure you know the downsides of the job as well as the upsides of it. It is not all cuddling kittens and puppies and fluffy stuff and saving lives. And make sure that you practice your communication skills from the off with everybody, the bus driver, the person at the supermarket. You can't really do it at the moment because there's a big person, but do you know what I mean? But really work on those skills, because if you've got good communication skills and this is something you decide you really want to do, you will do fabulously if you are able to talk to your clients and read them. And I think it's like, you know, like you and I read dogs, you know, and cats. When you see them, it's like, are you going to try and eat me? You're not going to try and eat me. Are you looking terrified? What can I do to make this an easier consultation for you as an animal? It's the same with the clients. I'm doing that. You know, as you're feeling your way through a consult, what do you want me to, you know, where are you at as a client? So I think that's the big things I would say, someone thinking about doing it. Make sure you know what you're letting yourself in for. Make sure you're aware of the fact that it isn't all sunshine and roses and unicorns and rainbows, because you have, I mean, all jobs have that. And make sure that your communication skills are good and you're resilient enough to deal with the bad stuff.
Thank you very much, Amy. And I'll make sure that your practice is in the show notes as well for people who need acupuncture, where Amy Watson stays at PinPoint Care. Well, thank you very much for your time, Amy.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I hope it's useful.